Hello and welcome to another episode of the AV Experience, the solo edition. I'm your host, Ryan, and the prodigal failure has returned. I said I was going to stream on Friday, spaced, didn't stream on Friday. Said I would stream on Monday, spaced, didn't stream on Monday. So here we are. A big part of that was the holidays and me being not very smart. And then we got hit with weather yesterday, and that made a mess because then we had to deal with the kids with school and all this other stuff, and it was just a disaster. But we got it taken care of. We're here. We're going to talk about amps. And man, amps. This comes up, I feel, more than it should. Jonathan and I talked about it together on our stream last week. There was a post on AudioGone calling me the snake oil king, which is funny because usually snake oil is encouraging people to buy things they don't need, not talk people out of things they don't need, which was strange, interesting. Never heard it used in that context. But I want to make sure that people understand my point of view on this. My point of view is not that amps can't make a difference. They can. They just need to be utilized in the correct context, in the correct scenarios, the correct utilization, with the correct speakers, the correct setups, the correct rooms, the correct all of that needs to be taken into account. So, what are some situations where that may be applicable? Well, I guess first off, let's talk about what people are saying. People commonly say that amps can make things sound better. They can create separated sound stages. They can make things cleaner. They can change frequencies, responses. They can do all of this stuff. And they can. They can. My point with that is no competently made amplifier. By competent, I mean one that is trying to be transparent. Will do those things or do things to the point where it's going to be audible. If an amp is doing that and it's trying to be competent or trying to be transparent, it would be viewed as a poorly designed and poorly manufactured amplifier. The amplifier is meant to amplify this voltage signal coming from the preamp and send that onto the speakers to create sound. Really shouldn't be doing anything else except doing that transparently. Ideally, we want to be hearing the music in the air as it was recorded or as close as possible. That's really not ever possible. There's going to be levels of compression. There's going to be all different kinds of stuff, but that's what the goal is. And people get caught up in this idea that amplifiers are somehow changing amps is going to create this massive difference in sound or even minute differences in sound. And ideally, that's not the case. What can happen, what gets people in trouble is going from amp to amp or AVR to amp or preamp to amp, all of those different scenarios, your gain structure can change. And if the gain structure changes, the SPL that is output with the preamp or AVR using the same level of output can change. And people have a tendency to misconstrue volume, SPL increases for clarity. And they think, oh man, this one's so much clearer. When in actuality, in a lot of those situations, all that's happened is the SPL has increased. But you've created this subjective opinion because you're not fast switching, you're not level matching, we're not creating a proper scientific experiment. We're allowing the subjective bias to creep in, which is bad because we as people are very bad about allowing subjective bias color our wants and desires or outcomes and anything in between. So if you don't create a scientific experiment and control for those variables, you're going to be misled in the conclusions you reach in a lot of scenarios. We've done this at M-Wave. We've done it at people's houses. I've done this countless times blind. And it's really important to do it blind for the aforementioned subjective bias. If you don't account for that stuff, even seeing what is playing will cause one to potentially color the outcome. And that's not what we want at all. We want an unbiased, unsubjective, objective conclusion. And to do that, you have to account for those variables. You ideally need to do it double blind. You need to level match. You do all of these things so that the conclusions you reach are objective ones. And we've done this with a ton of different amplifiers. And the conclusion we always reach is that I can't tell the difference. We've played test tones, we've done the same tracks, we've done all of these different things, and you can't tell the difference. Now, something you could theoretically tell the difference is if you have a very inefficient speaker and you're playing at loud levels. You can potentially have situations where the amplifier is going into you're clipping. You're creating distortion, which will sound different. You're going to and you will hear it. So those are situations where you can absolutely hear a difference. Somebody posted a question, Bing Dong 8571. That is a name. I don't understand. Don't you have like multi-$1,000 Trinov amps? Sounds like you have guy has buyer's confirmation. I am actually saying the opposite. What I'm saying is you're saying the Trinovs are multi-$1,000 amplifiers, which they are. I'm saying given an amplifier, if I was playing within the limitations of the amp, I could take Jonathan's T amp, which was $20, put it up against the Trinov, and I would not be able to tell the difference. So I don't think that is being, trying to make myself not have buyer's remorse. That is the complete polar opposite. I'm actually saying you, in a lot of situations, can spend far less and get very similar, if not identical outcomes, as long as variables are controlled for and you're playing within the capabilities of the equipment. That is the part that is important for people to remember. In order to use things properly, you must play within the capability of the equipment. And you should buy amplifiers and really the entirety of your signal chain based on the outcomes that you're looking to get to. Oh, you're talking about the other guy. I understand. Yeah, I see what you mean. Sorry for talking down. I understand what you mean now. I don't know what he meant. I'm not entirely sure, and it doesn't really matter. I'm not out to tell them that they're bad people. I just don't believe in that ideology. I am on the fence, and we just actually made a podcast about this for AVS Forum, and I encourage everybody to go watch it. I had Peter Aylett on, and Peter has been in the industry for a very long time. He has a history of grew up with parents that were musicians. They were always at different halls and things. So acoustics and music and all of this stuff is very important to him. And the conversation, he's been in the industry as a room designer and does some enormous and amazing projects. So the guy knows what he's talking about. And the conversation was, how do you design a room? And the main thing that we kept coming back to was that in order to design a room properly, you really need to define what you're trying to do with it. That is the most important thing. Define what the use case is. What are the expectations of the room? Are you going to be using the room for anything else outside of theatrical needs, music and movies? Are you going to be using it for anything else? But most importantly, things like seating distance, SPL needs, acoustics, what all room materials, dimensions, area, all of those things are hugely important. And those things will lead you to define what types of equipment you need. One of them, crucially, being an amplifier. If I have to throw sound a very long way, odds are I'm going to need more power, because for every doubling of distance, for every doubling of SPL, not doubling, but 3 SPL increase, 3 dB SPL increase, good Lord, we need a doubling of power. And for every doubling of distance, we lose 6 dB. So if you go, and this is generic, there are some speakers that don't adhere perfectly to this, but you get the idea. So when I go from 1 to 2 meters, I lose 6 dB. When I go from 2 to 4 meters, I lose 6 dB. When I go from 4 to 8 meters, I lose 6 dB. And you can also see the advantage here for why bigger rooms are better, because you can get a consistency across a broader range. As the doubling occurs, that doubling occurs over a longer and longer distance. So the sound uniformity that takes place will occur after a given distance of doubling, say from 2 to 4 meters. Well, now you got 2 meters to play with instead of 1 meter, 1 to 2 meters. And then from 4 to 8, now you got 4 meters to play with. So as long as you can get things there within the capability of the equipment and the room is big enough, that provides for a consistency across a greater seating range, which if you're trying to provide the same experience for multiple seats like commercial cinema, that's what you would want. You want a really big room, which is why their rooms are really big, or one of the reasons. So within that, if I'm trying to throw sound really far, as long as I'm within the capability of the speaker, because not all speakers are able to do that before they reach compression, maybe their voice will blow up if they had to play at a certain volume. I need more and more power because remember, for every 3 dB increase, I have to double the power. And this can get out of hand very, very fast. Not only that, but I also have to, depending on the design characteristics of the speaker, the cabinet, the drivers, all of that, I have to be able to deal with any level of impedance that that speaker has and any other minutia that comes up with that particular driver and speaker system. Those are things that can absolutely define and determine the need for different amplifiers and different capabilities. And this is not me saying, I'm going to go off on another tangent. This is not me saying that amps that directly color the sound are bad. Tube amps do exactly this, and you can utilize different tubes to create a different sound signature. That can absolutely happen. And that does not mean that that amp is bad. I am not saying that amps cannot color the sound. I am saying that the level that a lot of people think things can change, I believe personally that they're trying to create situations where they're rationalizing their own purchasing decisions. And if that's the direction you want to go, that is okay. I have nothing against that. I just want people to know if they're trying to take this from an objective standpoint, the majority that if the amplifier is designed and to be used in a competent way, not a competent way, that's a bad word. I shouldn't have said that. If you're trying to get an amplifier to deliver a transparent experience, the reasons to buy are not because you think the sound is going to change, but to buy amplifiers that can do obtain the objective result that you're trying to obtain. Clear as mud. So we've done this a lot. We've done a lot of these comparisons. Jonathan and I have talked about this ad nauseum. And we've used a lot of amplifiers that I guess people would say are more boutique audiophile. I mean, I've used a PS Audio BHK 300 that is said to be a really great amplifier, and it's been part of these comparisons. We've used Rotel, we've used Benchmark, we've used Marantz, we've used Anthem, we've used there's another, what, I can't think of the name. I feel like it starts with a B. It's on the tip of my tongue and I cannot think of the name. We've used a bunch of different amplifiers, way more than I've just listed, in order to satisfy our desire for experimentation. And to be fair, we would like to be told that we're wrong, to go in and think and be able to say that amplifiers color the sound and that changing X, Y, or Z is going to do something. But in our experience in doing all of this, it doesn't. And we've done the experiments, we've done them blind. And I find that a lot of people that are on the other side of this either say that the experiments are not needed. I can tell the difference just swapping cables. And the problem with that is you are playing into your own subjectivity. Why do you think medical studies do everything blind with placebos and all of this stuff? They do it because the human mind is highly, highly, highly susceptible to subjective biases. And if you don't account for those, you can lead yourself down a bunch of false pathways. Let me check what my dog is barking at. I hope I don't need to go upstairs to deal with the delivery. Nope, already took care of it. All right, we're good. Down a lot of false pathways, and that is part of the journey. I've made a lot of those decisions and been down a lot of those paths already in my journey, and that's part of the learning process. As long as you're willing to learn and not just, well, accept it and then try and reinforce that whatever you're trying to accept and beat it into the ground to make it real, even though objectively it may not be. Um, as long as you're able to accept that ideology, you can learn a lot. And I think it's valuable to learn those lessons. So I would encourage people to not be afraid of going down these pathways as long as you're okay with saying, you know what, I was wrong with that. And I will be the first to admit if I'm wrong. If somebody can show me an experiment that is controlled for these variables that I can experience, we can do it at M Wave, and I can tell the difference, I'm all for it. All for it. And again, measurably, there will more than likely be minutia that comes up, but our ears are not measurement devices. And for a transparent amplifier, an amplifier that's wanting to be transparent, I can't see this being from experimentation being something that's going to come to light. So enough about that. Let's take a look at a couple comments. You guys aren't very active, but it's kind of a weird time for me to stream anyway. To me, stage one is moving to external amps. Then it's what speakers you're trying to drive. Then it's how far the speakers. Exactly. It's accounting for those variables. And as long as you're accounting for those variables and using amplifiers to get to whatever you're trying to get, the desired experience, that's the correct way to take it, to go about this. Design for the end result. What do I need to do to get to that end result? And I was a person that misunderstood loudness and distortion until I was in a room that pushed 130 plus, and I couldn't tell it was loud. Where on my old paradigms, 90 dB seemed to be louder because of distortion. Yeah, this comes up all the time. But it's not just the speakers that can play into this. The amplifiers can play into this. The AVR preamp can play into this. The room can absolutely play into this. All of those things can create distortion. So I don't really think it's fair to say, though they are a predominant cause of it, to say that it's only the speaker's fault. You can for sure run an amplifier into clipping that will create distortion. You can absolutely clip a preamp that'll will cause distortion and clipping and compression. That can absolutely happen. So don't really think it's fair to say it's only the speakers, but I get what you mean. Uh, Billy says, totally agree. If your amp drives your speakers clean and to volume you need, the brand on the box doesn't matter. I would agree with that. Sometimes, though, you can have brand bias, and that can play subjectively into things. There are, and for me, that even plays a case. Brand bias can be a thing and is a thing, and it can make you feel one way or another about what you're experiencing. This comes into play not just in AV and home theater, but in everything. So, getting brands that you trust is a very big part of this. So, don't discount that. There is a big part of psychology that goes into AV and home theater. I think we actually talked about that on the stream podcast recording yesterday, where psychology is a huge, huge part of this, and how you feel and how you take things in and how brands and experiences make you feel and the equipment makes you, all of that. Definitely a big part of it, bigger than I think people make it out to be. So, except for Rockville and Pile, they can be good as long as used within the limitations of their equipment. Or you could get speakers that don't care about that. Like, let's say an amplifier has a really bad noise floor, but your speaker is not really sensitive at all and it's able to mask that noise floor. Could be a great potential pairing. Could be better if you had an amplifier with a better noise floor, as you could be clipping things off if it's really bad. But as long as you pair things within the capabilities of the entire system and look at the system as a whole, instead of, oh, this is a great component and this is a great component, but not thinking about how they work together as a system, you're going to have a good time. If you start looking at things individually instead of as the system, that's where you can start to really run yourself into problems, and it can get out of control quite quickly. And then it can be really difficult to troubleshoot because you got to look at everything then instead of looking at everything from a design standpoint. So, um, I think really anything can work. There are absolutely better amplifiers than others, but I think it's depending on what you're trying to get after on the same mindset. Uh, you can use far less clean power than you may think and get away with it without you necessarily noticing. We talk about this all the time with Synad and um, on the mainstreams that Jonathan and I do, and there is a limit to what the ears can pick up. So you can go clinical, and that can play psychologically into what you feel and know, and hey, what's going in is what's coming out. But do you need it? Don't know. Well, this may be a short stream if people aren't too active in the chat, which is okay because I got to go take apart a couple MBs and get them RMA'd for some customers. So, anybody have any other comments, questions before we wrap this up? Oh, the problem is the amplifier says pile on it. That goes back to the psychological feeling of brand bias. Nothing wrong with that. If it makes you feel a certain way, don't use it. Well, not exactly on topic, says Miller Time, but you once shared how you handle powering on and off a dumb commercial amp with some type of relay. Oh, I will show you. Let me find it. Shelly. They're not made in the US. 25 amp relay. This guy. Are they sold in the US now? What? They're sold in the US now. All right. So it's this guy. Let me share this screen. This guy. This is a 25 amp relay. You absolutely don't need it, but this is what I use. So the IP control system, when I power on the system, will flip all of these relays, and it does one every 2 seconds. It goes click, 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 and it goes through all of those. And I do it one every couple seconds to minimize inrush, and then everything powers on from there. After that, I power down the system, it does the opposite. So after everything shuts down, these turn off and go click, click, click. I actually don't think I do it at one every 2 seconds. I think I just turn them all off because you're not worried about inrush. So this is how I manage those dumb switches, and it works great. They even do power monitoring. It is absurd. Absurd. Let me turn this off. Absurd how much power some amplifiers use while idling. You absolutely want to turn them off. The amps that I've got are using, when the system turns on and it's just white noise playing, 250 watts each for the sub amps. Doing nothing. And there's 7 of them. That's a lot. That's a lot of power. And the amp effectively at that point is just a space heater. So these I would encourage people to look into. You do ideally want an IP control system to automate things. Otherwise, you would just use the Shelly app. The reason I went with Shelly is because their API is open. I don't have to use their app. I can send the API commands from the IP control system, in this case, HT Web Remote, which Nick designed, and I just send it commands. And it turns on the relays, which are connected to Wi-Fi. Does great. No problems. But if you don't have an IP control system, you can do it from probably Home Assistant would work, I would imagine, or you can do it from the app. Tiki Time says, do you think amp classes will go away except Class D? I don't think so. Different amps have different utilizations and use cases. So I don't think they will. There's also followings for different types of amplifiers. So just based on that, I don't think the other ones are in danger of going away. I could be wrong as technology improves. I mean, Class D, they're way more efficient. They're like 90 plus efficient. So maybe, but in the audiophile side, I think they'll always be non-Class D for sure. So I can't say that I think they'll go away. Again, happy to answer any questions that come up. Other things off topic. Did watch a movie. I need to watch another movie. Need to watch that Jurassic Predator, I think it was called. Jonathan texts me and goes, "Who recommended this? This has to be one of the worst movies I've ever seen." So I got to go watch that. I watched Nobody, which I rather enjoyed. I thought it was going to be more of a comedy action movie. It was not. It was more of a different offshoot of John Wick. I enjoyed it. I don't think it was as good as John Wick, but I enjoyed it. It had some comedic moments. My wife did not enjoy it. She said as such. She's like, that movie had no story. And she did not like that very much. So I watched Nobody. Got some other movies I need to watch. We go out of town this weekend, headed to Kentucky. We are driving. It's about 9 hours. Son has a soccer tournament or a soccer showcase, I guess it would be called, that we're going to be doing there. And then I will be returning Sunday. And then the following weekend, I've got a couple guys coming in town for demos of the Mad VR Experience Center. Billy Bomber says Nobody 2 is far better. I have them both. I will watch it. But I got some guys coming in for the Mad VR Experience Center demo. I've got a install that I have to do sometime during the week when I can find time. And yeah, that's what's coming up. So if anybody has any topics, I'm happy to go through them. Really, the conversation on amps came up because somebody made that audio post, and I thought it was hilarious that I'm the snake oil king. I'm going to get shirts, hopefully. I say I'm going to get a lot of shirts, and then they don't actually end up happening. But shirts that people can get, because that's just funny to me that would be the name that was used. And I think I know who said it. I disagreed with him on the reasons to buy an amplifier. Because he said that you could need an amplifier with an AVR. I'm like, no, you don't. As long as you're within the limitations of the system and you're not pushing to abhorrent levels with the need for power coming out of the AVR, you're not going to notice. So I disagreed. And I think that's where that came from, because that got quoted in there. So I'm pretty sure that's where that came from. Stephen McGully says the Stranger Things streaming seems way better than any other streaming I've seen. Bass seemed like Blu-ray quality. I'll have to try that. I've heard mixed things about the new Stranger Things, so that'll be interesting. Have you used Grok AI? I think it's great. It's like texting a human and answers my question in 10 seconds and uses tables. It keeps your subject in memory from question to question. I'll have to try it. I'm pretty sure I can use that with, what do I use? With, what is this called? Hold on. Where's that app? Where did it go? Hold on. I have a thing on my Mac that I can quickly call stuff up. Applications. Raycast. Pretty sure I can use it with Raycast. Let's see. How do I get to Raycast settings? Where is Raycast? It should be up here, and it's not up here. I'll deal with that later. But I'll have to look at Grok. I've heard good things. Haven't used it, but I've heard good things. So I'll try it. I like using it as a tool, as a resource when I need quick information. But even then, you really should fact check it, because it's wrong quite a bit. But it can be good for organizing information and doing things where menial tasks instead of trying to teach you. Even then, it can be okay. All right, guys. Well, this was a short stream, about 30 minutes, but we'll wrap it up. If you guys have any questions or ideas for topics, let me know. Just put them in the comments of this video. Don't drop them in chat here, because they'll get lost. But put them in the comments of this video if you have any suggestions for future topics, and we can talk about them. If I need to bring on a guest, we can do so. But I encourage everybody to go watch the AVS forum podcast about room design with Peter Aylett. It is, I think people will find it informative. It's, in my opinion, how you should tackle building a new room, making upgrades, and as such. So until next time, hopefully we'll do one on Thursday. But until then, stay safe out there. Enjoy the home theater journeys, and I will see you guys later.